Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Houston Oasis on this Easter Sunday. Spring Sunday, which if the weather outside is a perfect spring day, so be sure to enjoy the afternoon because it's summer in Houston is right around the corner. All right, so I like to start every morning with a couple of our core values, which you can see behind me, and today I want to highlight reality is not the reason, and people are more important than beliefs, to our more fundamental values. We've got a great lineup for you today. We'll have a couple songs by our musical guest, Jess Schneider, and our main talk will be from Anthony Cruz Pantojas. They'll be giving us their talk on being human, pedagogy of life. All right, so our main speaker today is Anthony Pantojas. They will be giving the talk Being Human. They are the Humanist Chaplain at Tufts University and have been recognized for numerous awards, including an Interfaith America, Interfaith Innovation Fellowship, and spearheaded an initiative for first-generation emerging spiritual, ethical, and cultural leaders in college. So please help me welcome to the front, Anthony Cruz Pantojas.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, or just greetings if you're listening via YouTube or the recording at some other moment in time. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here, enjoying a warmer weather than in Boston. So thank you so much for that delight this morning. I don't know, Jess, but I wanted more music. However, I am still grateful for kicking us off, putting us in the rhythm, and a little bit of jam. Today's talk is Being Human, a Pedagogy of Life. As the MC mentioned, I'm Anthony Cruz Pantojas. I use they, serious pronouns, and I serve as the Humanist Chaplain at Tufts University and in other nonprofit organizations where I serve as board member. I will not name them all. However, I will state that I am speaking in my own personal reflection. I am not at this time representing any of these organizations where I either volunteer or I work. So, being human, a pedagogy of life, as we stated in the description, is first of all a reflection. And what I mean by that is that how did I come to connect with humanism, of course, actually began not from an intellectual standpoint or intellectual curiosity or wonder, but it was actually through my studies in anthropology and social sciences that I began to question a few things. What is time? How did cultures come to be? How did religion emerge? Why do I believe at the time these particular texts or scriptures in comparison to maybe others? And of course, a lot of historical processes around how did we become a colony of the United States, right? And so many other questions that I had being born and raised in Puerto Rico, of course, during my youth migrating throughout various parts of the United States, coming back to the island, and again, out of my own curiosity in college, then migrating again to the US to do my theological studies, and since then haven't stopped collecting degrees. However, one point of connection through all of these experiences has been, as you have stated here so powerfully, a core value of people are more important than beliefs. That for me was a driving force and energy. It's the understanding that it doesn't matter, well, it does matter, however, it should not be the totality, right, that we reduce the human experience, the human condition, to specific points of difference or similarities, but that there is multiple processes of unfolding, of growth, of learning, and really pondering how are we making meaning in our life. That was just me warming up. Okay. So for today's talk, I'm just going to give you a short roadmap of what I am going to try to share with you today. And the way that I like to give talks, presentations, panels, what have you, is that I just tease you a little bit in the morning, and then hopefully during lunch or during break or during the day, we have further time to actually engage in deeper conversations. Because as I was told, I have 30 minutes. So I will not rush and try to do all of what I want to do with all of you, with this community, in just 30 minutes. So I will first of all talk about my own positionality, pedagogy of life, being human. I will talk about on humanism, both my own definition and what I've been reflecting and pondering upon, then utilizing a global perspective, basically given by the Humanist International, and then open it up for a community open dialogue. So let's see if I can make it. Let's see. So, in terms of my own positionality, I identify myself as a queer Afro-Boricua. I'm first generation, low income still, neurodivergent, and a non-linear thinker and processor. And I always share this in all of my presentations because I think that it gives you a small window of who I am, how I process, how I move in the world, and hopefully it does not disappoint you if you're having specific expectations or desires, right, of performance from a speaker. And then from an academic standpoint, I identify as a transdisciplinary scholar, practitioner, and activist that's informed and rooted in the fields of cultural studies, decolonial thought, and spirituality. Now, I mention this because, again, a lot of times when we have a speaker, we might not necessarily do a lot of research or searching, or might not have time to even read the bulletin, right? That a lot of folks work so hard to create this for us. However, it is important to understand that a person's becoming, unfolding, and processes of learning from a personal standpoint, right, from the self, and the academic add-ons that we all have, right, come together to then form me in this case. So when I talk about a pedagogy of life, and of course I'm inverting, I know that pedagogy was last in the title, however I wanted to invert it because I think it is a really important framework for us to have before I move on and expand on other ideas and concepts that I will be presenting. A pedagogy of life is actually a methodology that multiple scholars from the global south, from North America, and multiple parts of the world have been pondering, have been reflecting on, and have been grappling with. And basically, it's this understanding that pedagogy is not just the mere process of sharing information or teaching and receiving, right, but that it's actually a methodology. And so when I came across this methodology, initially through Paulo Freire, a philosopher from Brazil, Bell Hooks, and other thinkers like Jackie Alexander, who informs a lot of my framework around African and Afro-diasporic philosophies, I said, this is definitely informing my humanist framework and my humanist approach. So I would just read it for us in case you cannot see it because of the glare. And Jackie Alexander states in her book, Pedagogies of Crossing, Thus, I came to understand pedagogies in multiple ways, as something given, as in handed, revealed, as in breaking through, transgressing, disrupting, displacing, inverting inherited concepts and practices, those psychic, analytic, and organizational methodologies we deploy to know what we believe, what we know so as to make conversations and solidarities possible, and both epistemic and ontological project bound to our beingness, and therefore akin to Freire's formulation of pedagogy as indispensable methodology. Again, here, Jackie Alexander, of course, giving honor, right, and citation to Paulo Freire, of course, around this notion. And this is important to me because when I first started exploring humanism, it was actually through the Humanist Institute, which is now part of the AHA Center for Education that just celebrated, actually, its 5th anniversary of existence post-merger. And this is important to me because I was actually an undergrad student at the time when I first came across the Humanist Institute, and while I was aiming to finish my undergrad studies, I took on this other project of wanting to be formed, be educated, and be mentored by many of the faculty, instructors, and teachers at the time of the Humanist Institute. However, part of the reflection that, of course, I can do now that I did not have at the time, and we're talking about 6 years ago or more, is the understanding of where does the cultural expressions and the cultural dynamics come together in the humanist, free-thinking, secularist, right, experience and its formation. That was definitely something I did not have at the time, and all I was focused on was trying to memorize all the thinkers, trying to memorize all the powerful quotes, trying to create frameworks of debunking religion, spirituality, and all these other forms, right? And really root myself in this secular, non-theist framework. However, as time went on, and of course I continued to do many degrees, move across the US, do an internship at one of the hospitals for my chaplaincy during COVID, I began to deeply reflect about where is our experience as we relate to other humans and other sentient beings in all the multiplicity of processes that we process every day, that we live and experience every day, that sometimes challenges even those formulas that we have on our mind, or that specific response that I have ready to go, right? But we get disrupted, or we get challenged, or something happens that I was not expecting, and thus open then the possibilities to begin to see that life itself is a teacher, that we are learning as the worlds are unfolding. And for me, that was definitely a revolutionary thought, an idea, an experience in general, because it then made me realize that humanism is much more than just ... definition. I will expand on it later. So when we talk about being human, I wanted to first of all frame it through an Afro-diasporic and Afro-intellectual professor, Sakaya Jackson, that states that being human is not about a set of attributes or capacities, nor is it a goal to be attained. Rather, it is an ongoing process of becoming. A becoming that is always already entangled with the material world and with other beings. It is through this process of entanglement that we come to know ourselves and the world around us. Again, I think a more beautiful and succinct way of just clarifying what I just stated. But I think it's so powerful because this is actually one of the quotes that keeps me going in my work. Right? It's the understanding that being human, that becoming human, right, that speaks to an ongoing process, gives you energy. At least it does to me. It tells me that my learning, that my unfolding is not done. That I have so much more to learn, so much more to explore, so much more to discover. And I'm excited about that invitation, about that challenge. And sometimes even about the threat, right? We get comfortable and we just want to be in our small bubbles, in our own states. Sometimes saying, you know, if it doesn't happen in my backyard, might not necessarily face me. However, this is where then the human process of becoming more human, right, and the humanistic framework, then, at least for me, begins to take form. And what do I mean by that is that, again, I am making the intellectual processes of how do I become a humanist, a free thinker, a secularist, what have you, or questioning or any other concept, and my relationship with the world around me. Which means that I am paying attention to the social constructions that we create. The political, the religious, the cultural, the educational, the human, right, microsystems that we create called neighborhoods, communities, gated communities. That all of it, it's implicated in our processes, and that they are not separate. Okay, I'm gonna try to read it. My apologies, it kind of shifted fonts. So when I began to study humanism through the Humanist Institute and later on at Midville Lombard and actually earning my degree in my master's in humanist studies, I came across the fact that there are so many definitions of humanism. There's more than 50 definitions. Some of them, of course, are compiled through the AHA website, and you can definitely go and choose whichever one you like. However, for me, I couldn't really find one that kind of fit. One that I could memorize, and this one, of course, I do not have memorized yet. However, for me, this definition is, as I'm going to be stating, my working one so far. So for me, humanism can be considered as a continued praxis, connecting the theories of everyday life with meaningful practices, especially centering the question, how do we be together? We think about the complexities, challenges, and possibilities of culture, power, spirituality, and the dynamics that are informing the inner and outer world. And I cannot see, my apologies, any further because, you know, as you can see with my glasses, I'm kind of blind myself. But basically, I am looking at both the embodied practice as well as the understanding that being, right, the process that I defined earlier, is a continued and evolving process that help us become more aware, to relate, and to pay attention to how do we include diverse understandings and the capacities for more possibilities, right? So again, in this definition, really exploring the understanding that even in humanism, it is still a dynamic tradition, some might say, like myself, traditions, meaning that it does not only have one origin, but that humanism has existed over the centuries, even before the term was coined, and that proto-humanism has existed in other parts of the globe as well. Again, even though they might not necessarily use the term humanism, they might use other frameworks. However, this is important for me because I do honor the fact that the emerging of my humanist understanding is informed by Black feminist thought, like I said, from bell hooks and other thinkers, as well as the conceptions of theories of liberatory practice, as we saw with the pedagogy definition, and African philosophy, specifically looking at traditions like Ubuntu and other philosophies in the African continent that are really pointing to the fact that, again, that there are humanists, there are free-thinking frameworks, again, that are really entangling the human experience, not just from one location, but from multi-locations, in a way inviting us to consider global possibilities. And as I mentioned, or as it was read in my bio, serving as a humanist chaplain in a university at Tufts, allows me a specific experience, window, and doorway to really seeing what are the possibilities of seeing humanism in an embodied, non-organizational framework, but actually humanism in the everyday life. Humanism beyond the control of our institutions, of our boards of directors, and specific desired dreams and aspirations, but a humanism that is playful, that is being engaged, that is being pushed and pulled by 18 to 21 and on, of course, graduate students and so forth. And so sitting at this crossroads, it's really, again, invigorating, it's very powerful, and again, it's always keeping me in my toes because, again, it's more about people are more important than beliefs than it is about necessarily putting a foundation and then vetting people or filtering people based on those filters, which I think is important because how we kind of read with the definition about humanism, who's humanism, who's free thinking or free thought or secularist, ideas or definitions are we utilizing that are inviting others in or leaving people out? And if we are still maintaining a pedagogical framework, then we do have to recognize that we are all in different registrars of learning, of unfolding, of discovery, questioning, and so on. I will say, though, and I will use a definition that I have here, that even though I am using all these different concepts and ideas and frameworks, I do still hold the understanding that humanism is rooted and centered on a secular perspective, that seeks to elicit the fullness of the human experience, which means paying attention to how human beings have continued to evolve and have become more aware of themselves. I'll say that again. Becoming aware of themselves and those with whom they relate. Such attention includes diverse understandings in the most capacious way, which is why I got so excited when I got the invitation to come and speak to this community, because I spent time looking at the website, looking at other groups, and one of the most appealing dimensions, is that you are looking at the relational and also at the same time looking at more capacious way of building community beyond traditional frameworks or methods that have been either replicated, practiced, or done before, which for me, again, is very exciting. Now, I did promise that we were at least going to do one quote and read one definition of humanism, again, beyond the North American or the Western framework. And this is basically, as we can see here, the minimum statement on humanism developed by the Humanist International. And this is basically, I would say, just an excerpt of the Amsterdam Declaration published in 2022. It's much longer, much richer, and definitely has many bullets that you can definitely expand and reflect on, maybe even during coffee or lunch. But basically, it states that humanism is a democratic and ethical life stance that affirms that human beings have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape their own lives. Humanism stands for the building of a more humane society through an ethics based on human and other natural values, in a spirit of reason and free inquiry through human capabilities. Humanism is not theistic, and it does not accept supernatural views of reality. Any responses? Any inklings? Anyone else? So don't forget it. Keep it with you, so we can expand later on, right? And the reason why I bring this is because Humanist International, similar to the American Humanist Association and other organizations, right, are a conglomeration of other organizations, other individuals, other cultural and worldviews that are coming together to entangle themselves in creating a long-lasting institution, legacies, and work. And I think that that is so powerful and appealing because it is an invitation to say, hold on, I cannot do it by myself. That means that all the books and knowledge that I have amassed and acquire is not enough. That I need to be in conversation with other people, with other individuals that are experiencing and living their humanism, their non-theism, their own secular, in their own contextual realities. And so I think that this definition, I always like to use it. Truth be told, it's been like the third time. But I think that is really important because it is inviting, again, another institution that, of course, the AHA belongs to actually, but that nonetheless, again, is inviting us to consider we are in relationship. We are invested together in continuing to think about, to process, to learn, and to be, right, in different ways than that of which I imagined initially. And then I will definitely open it up for further conversations with all of us when I put the question, when we think about entangled possibilities for us. And I like this imagery because, again, it's entangled, right? Which means that at some point, you really do not know if you're coming or going, or where did you start, or what was that initial inkling that brought you into a particular inquiry, quandary, question, right? But that nonetheless, we are entangled together. And basically, one of the questions that I want us to consider this morning is, how can we harness humanism to practice interdependence, critical inquiry, and a renewed ethics of care? Now, my apologies, I know that I did not define ethics of care. That's another presentation. However, it is one of the main frameworks that I have been constantly developing throughout my practice, and it's basically the understanding that in order for us to live in a healthy, humanist, secularist, free-thinking, non-theist, organizational right, network or system caring for one another, caring with is an important not only definition or intellectual project, but should be an ongoing process that we're constantly grappling with in our journey. And it is the understanding that as we try to practice being human, as we try to practice being in this space together over many, many months and many, many years, right? There are opportunities for learning. There are missteps that we sometimes take, right? With each other, with the organizations, with family members, with this particular membership. And that should be a moment of pausing and saying, I think I did a misstep, or I think I did something great, right? And hopefully, again, that centers the fact that we should always have a critical inquiry. And critical inquiry not just against religion, against spirituality, against myths or what have you, but critical inquiry towards ourselves, to the truths, to the practices, to the behaviors, to the prejudices, biases, or other aspects that we have not either experienced or we have not yet discovered. But because we're constantly being entangled together, there are those generative moments to learning from others. And hopefully moving away, again, from just an intellectual exercise to hopefully a framework where we do consider our communities, and of course this has different dimensions of up and downs, ebbs and flows, but that we consider it to be a kingship. That I am invested in your growth, that I am invested in your evolution broadly defined, that I care about your flourishing, because I understand that in your flourishing, I am also flourishing and becoming more free. And bringing down these walls of separation and divide of just saying, I am only interested in myself and my immediate family. But again, hopefully, as we considered entangled possibilities, we can hold that tension of multiple ways. Of yes, caring for your family, but also caring for your chosen family. Caring for those that become family because they constantly are showing up in your life through your processes of unfolding, through your joys and pains and suffering. They might not have the right quote or the right citation, but they are showing up. Even if they're just being silent, they're there for you. And that is one of my visions for humanism, for everyday humanism, is that it goes beyond the books, the manuscripts, the definitions that we have developed, and that we are embodying it. And that in that embodiment, we're recognizing that it's intersectional, and that there are many multiple possibilities for being human, for being a humanist, for being a free thinker. Thank you very much. I will say that if you want to support the Humanist Chaplaincy, it does not go to me, by the way. Feel free to do the scan or email me. Definitely would love to partner with you and really envision what does humanism look like in a context of higher ed. How does it look like being in relationship across multiple organizations, multiple systems, and again, really supporting, nurturing, and enriching humanism that looks diverse, that it's radical, and that it's a dynamic tradition for all of us.
All right, and we're going to go ahead and start. The first question is from our Zoom, from John. and it is, I wonder about the concept that only reason and the rationale is real. I've known very rational people who are very out of touch. For example, before E equals MC squared, reason thought there's only matter. What about like unseen energies like love or emotions?
I don't know where to go. Anyway, thank you so much for that question, and I think that that's an ongoing challenge, right? I think that, of course, we based our framework on reason, scientific inquiry, and all the mathematical, right, and knowledge that we have created over centuries, right, and that we continue to refine, that we continue to curate, if you will, right, in order to produce a more fill in the blank, right? The result that we're seeking. And I think that then when we talk about the embodied experience in the human condition, I think that that's where things get messy, right? Because I don't think that there's one perfect manual that teaches us how to be the best human, how to be compassionate, how to relate to others across difference, as well as similarities, how to be in proximity, how to care for others, right? And that caring for others, as I said in my presentation, right, is very broad and acknowledges multiple layers of oppression, of disenfranchisement, and of course, recognizing that even today, right, there's still this understanding that not everyone is fully human, right? And so how do we recognize those processes? So I do appreciate your question, because I do think that there's more work to be done.
Next question back here.
Hi, thank you for the presentation today. Do you mind to share a simple definition or humanism or humanist that like me can use with other common peoples, and the classroom definition you may have, you just have presented? Is there one, 2 lines, for example, just in case?
Yeah, I think that that's where the learning comes to play. I haven't developed a 2-liner, but I think that definitely humanism can be defined as the practice of being human and invitation for its most capacious unfolding and expressions. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Next question over here.
Yes, kind of a nuts and bolts question. There are many schools support religious organizations on campuses. They'll give them office space or opportunities to interact. Humanism is new to that type of story. Do you receive the same treatment as the religious organizations? And also, do you interact with the religious organizations at all? Because sometimes they'll do ecumenical stuff.
Yeah, let's see how I can answer that question. I think that at least in the context where I work at Tufts University, there is the understanding that all the traditions represented are equal, right, and are inclusive regardless of the title that you have in your name tag, right? So you can say Protestant chaplain, Hindu chaplain, Africana spirituality chaplain, humanist, whatever, right? Even though you have that title, right, you're still caring, supporting staff, students, and the spectrum of belief, of practice, and human condition. But then the same thing goes for us as professionals. We are cared for, we're supported in the university in that same standard. In a more religious setting, I would say that we still have not reached the fullness, right, of always being counted upon, being called or being summoned or being requested to be in spaces. I think that that's a new arena, as you're saying. However, I do know a few folks, of course, myself included, that do serve in those more national, right, boards or organizations and are showing body, are showing face, and are becoming that voice. But I think that, yes, it's an invitation for all of us to think about how can we be in relationship and solidarity with other organizations across the religious spectrum, because as we are seeing, there's so much violence that's being perpetrated against the humanist, non-theist, secular communities across the U.S. and globally even more so, right? So I think, how do we continue to show up and change specifically the narrative and the Bible is that atheists are immoral, that humanists fill in the blank, that free thinkers are, right? And I think the more that we continue to show up, we definitely demystify, no pun intended, right? That imagery that has been created over decades.
Right. We have a question over here.
Yes. Is humanism intrinsically democratic with a small d, or if you like, is democracy intrinsically humanistic?
I think that democracy in its best is an aspiration. I don't think that we have fully achieved what democracy means, and of course it depends on your working definition of democracy and the spoken or unspoken dreams or desires or aspirations that we have as human beings that then we kind of reproduce to our notion of democracy. But I think that democracy in itself is something that's unfolding, and it depends on how are you practicing it, that then might say it's this framework or this political stance or this one or this other. However, I will say that I think democracy from a North American standpoint can definitely learn about what does democracy look like in other parts of the world, and especially across the multiplicity of political ideologies that sometimes even coexist in other parties, right, and other political organizations. That I think might humble us a little bit when we say we're this or that, and this and that, and actually to other parts of the world, we might not necessarily be that. Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? One more. All right.
Could you say something about how the relationship for other forms of life, nature, may figure into the understanding and application of humanism?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's this notion, right, that humanism is the idolatry or the centering of the human above nature, right? And of course that comes into Western realities of religious, right, dogmatism and all these frameworks that continue to influence a lot of the Western discourses. That being said, I do think that human beings are in relationship with not only other sentient beings and other parts of the nature, but that we ourselves are part of nature. And so I think that we are actually being challenged to how are we embodying, practicing our values, our ethics, specifically across natural inquiry and natural ways of not only being human, but also treating, right, other animals, other sentient beings that sometimes we continue to disregard because we think that we have the reason and that we have the capacity, right, to make those decisions. And so I think that it's definitely a tenet that I think a lot of atheists, free thinkers, secularists are continuing to grapple with and continuing to learn, right? And that's where I kind of quoted as Humanist International, other modes of knowing, because I think that that also invites other epistemologies from indigenous communities, right, that for decades and centuries have been relating to the natural world in different ways that has the West and other parts of the globe, or the modernized world.
All right, thank you. And we will be doing Q&A after the coffee break. But my takeaway from this talk is my overthinking is not a bad thing. I'm just being I'm skeptical of myself. That's what I'm going to reframe that as. All right, so before we go to a coffee break, I do want to make a couple of announcements. First off, lunch today is going to be at Abdallah's. You can find the address in the handout for this week. Also on Saturday, April 29th at 1 p.m., we'll be volunteering at the Houston Food Bank. If you can't make it, or if you have any food that you do want to donate, bring that food next Sunday, and Sarah has generously offered to take it to get donated when she goes to volunteer. And then on Wednesday, May 10th, 7 to 9 p.m., we'll be doing a book club at Moon Tower Inn, and they're reading 6 Feet Over. So thank you to everyone being here today. A special thank you to Jess Snyder and Anthony Cruz Pantojas. Be sure and keep in touch with our emails, Facebook posts, Meetup, however you keep in in touch with us, and we'll see you next week. Get out, enjoy this beautiful spring weather.
Wait a month and then you'll see. As I remind you what it's me. 100 different little ways to wrap your head around. I'll say, wait a month and then you'll see. In the middle of the night, as I lay down, I wonder why. Is my future looking bright? I'm just trying to live my life, but I doubt I do right. We go up, down, every time, everybody's coming out. Yeah, we sing songs, half bound, watching that body move around. Take your time and watch your life with different strobes, with different lights. Every night you take the burn, take it all and twist and turn. And when you walk, you trip and fall. Get back up, it's time to cry. Don't you ever give on up. It's time to be someone. From the future I see you. Yeah, I'm seeing all your moves, and I'm liking what you do. Can I wait till you see too? When there's nothing left to prove. Now they're looking from afar, knowing one day that you'll be a star. We all have ups and downs, different smiles and some frowns. A lot of people in their doubts. We go up, down, every time, everybody's coming out. Yeah, we sing songs, half bound, watching that body move around. Just take your time and watch your life, different strokes and different lights. Every night you take the burn, take it all and twist and turn. And when you walk, you trip and fall. Get back up, it's time to cry. Don't you never give on up. It's time to be someone. Go up, down, every time, everybody's coming out. Yeah, we sing songs, half bound, watch that body move around. Just take your time and watch your life with different strobes and different lights. Every night you take the burn, take it all and twist and turn. And when you walk, you trip and fall. Get back up, it's time to crawl. Don't you ever give on up. It's time to be someone.